Hey there everyone, my name's Andrew, and this is Canadian Starships. Welcome back to number 13 on the 1000 Scale Enterprise D project. In this update, my big goal is to get that top saucer half installed. But before that can go on, the window lighting needs to be installed into the saucer section. The phasers need to be connected, the navigation lights need to be connected, some lighting needs to go into the neck, and there's still a little bit of wiring in that neck that needs to be connected with the rest of the grid. So that's what we're going to be working on in this update. There's a couple challenges. I have to figure out where the best placement for the LEDs for the windows are and which LEDs I actually put in for the window lighting on the secondary hull, because I want to make sure that I'm using the exact same LED strips for both. And it's been a while, so I need to go back to my reference of information on what I've previously done to verify that. That's a good note. It's always good to make sure that you take pictures of your project as you go, because as you may seal up different sections, you might want to be able to look back and see what you put in and how exactly it was wired up. If you have video or pictures, sure makes that process a lot easier. Well, let's get right at it. But before we get started, why not take a moment and click the subscribe button, and while you're here, click on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Here we have the top saucer section. We have the phaser strip, which is here, and the wires coming out of that. We've got the 5 navigation lights around the saucer, and then in the middle, just behind the bridge, is 1 flasher. It's the only flasher on the entire saucer. This is going to be just wired through to the back at the neck, and then I'm going to consolidate these navigation lights, because they're all on the same circuit, back to the neck, and I'll just decide to take the center one along one of the edges. The trick is going to be figuring out exactly where to place the LED strips for the window lighting. And the normal thing that would be really easy to do would be to take a strip and just put 1 strip along here to do all the outer windows and 1 strip along in here to do the inner windows. But the depth of the kit on the saucer area where the phaser array is does not allow for these strips to be on their side like that. That's why we had to go with the 2020 LED strips for the phaser array, because I couldn't use the standard 50/50s on their side. It would not allow the 2 halves of the saucer to close. So I'm gonna have to look at the other side of this, and I'm gonna have to mark out some way areas where I can get a stretch of lights. So say where these escape pods are on the front here, where I can lay down a stretch of LED directly on the other side where it won't affect any of the windows. Like there's a nice long stretch over here where I can put a section, same on the other side. So I'm gonna have to find these strategic locations to be able to put these, because I don't want to block the windows with the LED strips. I've marked out the spots along the edge here on this side of the phaser strip where I could fit some LEDs without blocking the lights. I can't put them on the bottom portion of the saucer because that whole area on the outer edge past the phaser array is just packed full of windows. There are no empty spots to put them, so I'm gonna have to put them on the top saucer, but the light will bounce around enough inside that that'll still shine through these top windows. So what I'm gonna do is turn this over, and you should be able to see through here the areas that are dark, and I can definitely at least hold it up to the light to be able to see that. And so the dark coming through will show me the locations where those LED strips need to go. And what I'm going to do for this case is I'm going to temporarily tack them down in the locations after I get them wired up. These are ones that I had originally done for the warp nacelles, but I went a different direction on those. So these ones have actually had their 24-hour test. And but what I'm going to do is I am going to tack them down in the locations where they need to be, just temporarily tacked down, and wire everything up as if I'm going to seal it all up. Then I'm going to let it do its 24-hour test where they are located. And if everything goes well, then I will permanently affix everything in place. But I need to size everything up, and I want to test it with all of the wiring running where it needs to in order to connect properly down to the neck. So the first segment is all wired up, and this is the one that I had previously set aside for the Warp Chiller grills, but used the higher density. And it's just tacked down with the sticky backing, which is not good enough to permanently install into the ship, but good enough for making sure that all the wiring is done properly to get it around where it needs to go. These will be lengthened here on the end. I'm working on getting the other side done, and I just wanted to remind you that the solder connection may or may not hold on its own on these LED strips. I had such a hard time with the higher density LED strips. The contact points are just that much smaller and much more difficult to work with. These ones are easier because they've got a better surface and they seem to take the solder better, but I still pre-drill the 3 holes in the contacts and feed the wires through. That way you have a physical connection as well as the solder connection. And then I do cover the ends with the shrink tube, which you can see on the ones over there. So as many ways to secure the wiring to the LEDs, the better. The outer saucer section LEDs are now all wired up. They've had their 24-hour test, and to show you, I will plug this in and all the lights turn on. So I can now permanently attach these to the ship. Right now they're just attached with the sticky backing and a little bit of hot melt glue just for wire maintenance. And I will also shorten this so that it's down to 1 wire for each color, closer to the hull. That'll make managing everything a little bit easier. This was just done temporarily so that I could get it plugged into the breadboard easily. The other thing that I will have to now do on the top saucer section is to wire up the navigation lights. The lighting for the internal section of the saucer will go on the bottom half of the saucer, which is already attached to the rest of the ship. The top saucer is fully prepared for going on to the bottom. All the wiring has been consolidated and it's been fully secured down to the ship. I also took a few moments and used some epoxy just to really secure the joint where the wiring for the phaser array joins the LED strip, just so that in case of any tension during installation, there's no chance of those coming undone, because it would be a nightmare to go back in and fix that if, for example, a solder joint came undone because too much tension was put on this while things were being connected. So I'm going to move on to the lower saucer section, get that lighting in, get the neck lighting in, get it all consolidated the same way I did here and tacked down, and then we should be pretty good to look at that daunting process of putting the top saucer on permanently. We've got the main model back on the bench to work on the wire consolidation, tidying it all up, securing it all down, and hooking everything else that needs to still be hooked up together. And I've got the lighting for the inside of the saucer. This will cover the top and the bottom. And I've got the neck lighting, but I've just made a realization. I'm going to need to add a 3rd strip of LEDs to this because, well, although I've got enough to do both sides, I really need a piece to go and light the back of the neck. So I'm going to need to wire up a 3rd strand of LEDs to this little section here. And of course, that strand of LEDs will need to undergo its stress test as well. So that's going to take up a little bit of time, but I have a lot to do here in the meantime, connecting these LEDs in, doing up the phaser strips. I can connect those right now because everything is secured down to this piece. The hard part is anything that's connected to the saucer, because I'm going to have to kind of like clamshell it up, secure it in place somehow temporarily, to connect everything and then close it down. So I'm going to work on getting these LEDs with a third strip on it, and while that's doing its test, I'm going to wire everything else up. Now here's a look at all of the wiring fully connected and secured down. May look a little bit of a mess. There's a bit of a bird's nest here, but it is fully secured down and tidied up as much as is possible. The only things that are not connected are what needs to connect to the top saucer. So we've got the lines for the phaser arrays here. They're going to be connected to the top phaser arrays. There's a data line here, which is the yellow one for the top saucer phaser, and it's just coming out the post here. All of the window lighting is fully wired up with just a single feed for positive, negative, and data to connect to the top saucer windows. We've got the negative and the positive here for the flasher. The only flasher on the saucer is on the top behind the bridge, so that's got to be connected up there. And all of the nav lights have been connected to the window lighting strips to grab their power from there. I'm going to do the same on the top saucer, so I don't have to worry about trying to connect those two halves together. Just the mains for those window lights. Then what I need to do is reposition this and figure out a way of propping the top saucer piece up like an open clamshell, get all that wiring connected, close it down, and secure it down with the epoxy.
Clamshell mode has been successfully done, and as you can see, all of the wiring has been connected. And what I did in order to clamshell mode this is I took some clips on top of some margarine containers, did a little bit of hot melt glue just to make sure that it wouldn't move on me, and that's holding it nicely in place. And so all of that wiring is perfectly secured down with epoxy. If you see any hot melt glue, it was only used to temporarily tack it down while the epoxy was curing. And that is all of the solder work done on this project. The next job is to seal this thing closed. And then once that's done, we're moving on to some brand new steps, mainly doing all of the seam work putty. And this saucer section is going to take quite a bit of detailed putty work just because of the nature of how this kit was cast. There's some other very noticeable areas that will need some putty work, but that's the next step after this is on top.
Here we have one ship fully secured together. I have absolutely every single clip in my shop keeping this thing secured. It will stay this way for about 24 hours so that the epoxy gets a good chance to cure. And you might notice the back over here, the ship doesn't quite align on the back. The back area is quite droopy. So what I will do is I will use this thin piece of brass to pull up the hull on this area, and I'll epoxy it as I go so that it'll bring it up to the appropriate level, and then it'll be puttied to smooth that out. This seam here where the saucer meets the neck has been lifted up, and so it is fairly even as it goes across here, about as even as it possibly can be. So that is the major construction done on this project. The only other thing I need to add is the impulse engine pieces and then the deflector part, which won't go on until the ship is complete. So I will get the impulse engines installed, and then that is the last of the major construction done, and we are done with this phase of the project. The next thing I will do is all the seam work. There are some seams that need some reinforcement on the back here where the pylons meet the secondary hull. That was always intentional to have to go back through and reinforce those. So I'm going to get the impulse engines on, and that'll be construction complete. And with the 2 impulse engines installed, that is all of the construction, minus the deflector dish, which won't go on until the whole thing is done. That's all of the construction complete. So I'm officially done the construction phase. Well, as soon as I'm able to take the tape off, I'm officially done the construction phase. I am so glad. And with the construction finally done on this thing, that is the end of today's update. This has been such a brute of a project to put together. It is not a kit for the faint of heart. It is not your simple round 2 model kit that goes together really simply. It requires a lot of problem solving and a lot of ingenuity to put this thing together properly, and I'm so glad that it is finally done, because now we can move on to the plethora of seam work that is going to need to be taken care of and getting this thing prepared for painting. I am really looking forward to getting onto the painting stage, but all that preparation work has to go into it first, and that's what's going to happen in the next update. But that's going to be it for today. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure that you hit that like button. If you're new to my channel or you haven't done so yet, why not hit that subscribe button today? As of recording this, we're only 13 subscriptions away from the big 1K subscription mark for the 1000 Scale Enterprise D project. I'm so excited to be almost there. So please make sure that you hit that subscribe button. But for now, my name is Andrew, and this is Canadian Starships. Have a great day, everyone.